But now we have left it, it makes sense that we use our freedom of decision making.
The North Korea's nuclear capability.
They were unwilling to commit even to talking about what the end point of the process might be.
안녕하세요 여러분, 김지윤입니다. 한국에 계시는 대사님들은 과연 어떤 집에서 살까? 여러분 궁금하시죠? 그래서 제가 오늘 찾아왔습니다. 주한 영국 대사관저 여러분을 초대합니다. 저와 함께 들어가시죠.
Hello, welcome.
Ambassador Smith.
Oh, very nice to see you again.
Well, very nice to see you again too. This is a beautiful residence. This is really beautiful residence. I've been to some of the ambassador's residence in Korea, and then I always thought this one was the most beautiful one.
We're very lucky to have this one. It's it's not the most modern of residences, but it's for all that, it's a great. It feels a great privilege to live in a historic building.
I see. Can you show me around a little bit?
Absolutely.
It's really old one, like a 120 years old building.
That's right. It's actually even older than that. It's 131 years old. And the British arrived here on this site in about 1883. And so 7 years later, we started building this building. And for most of the time, in the last 130 years, this is where we've done our work of building bridges between the UK and Korea.
Well, thank you for inviting us, Ambassador Smith. I know you're very fluent in Korea, but we are going to do the interview in English today. Of course, I'm going to give you a chance to speak Korean. You're fluent Korean. Well, actually, Joseon Dynasty had diplomatic relations with the UK. Like 1883, I remember. So we kind of count from that year. So it is 138th anniversary.
Yes, indeed.
For the two countries. I have to admit, however, that Korea's foreign policy is very much focused on the neighboring countries in the Asia-Pacific region. Personally, I believe we have to go beyond. But I would like to ask you, because you're an ambassador to Korea, so what is Korea to Britain? And vice versa. Why we should have a special relations?
Right. Well, what is Korea to the United Kingdom? I think there are a number of very quick associations that a lot of British people would make about Korea. A large proportion of the British population that has a smartphone is going to make an immediate association with Korea. Everyone is very clear where Samsung comes from these days. And so I think that sort of image of Korea as a sort of industrial and technological powerhouse is pretty strong in the minds of British people. Right now, there's no question that one individual who brings Korea to the attention of British people on a regular basis is Son Heung-min, because a lot of people in the UK will also remember the scenes from the 2002 World Cup. I think hosting the World Cup it does amazing things for a country to bring it to the attention of the world at that point, and very much associated Korea as a sort of nation of people who were very keen on sport. And when they got involved, they gave it 150%.
That's interesting, because we always think that Korea became very well known to the world and global community through the Olympic Games. You were mentioning World Cup.
Yeah, do you know, I think, and that's very much a personal impression. But
I can see that you're a British ambassador. So what's the football? I mean, is it football, soccer? It should be football. Are you going to be insulted if I say the soccer?
You can call it soccer. Do you know why? Because very traditional people in the UK, if you say football, they will say, do you mean association football or rugby football?
Oh.
That's a complicated question.
Okay.
But actually, I really don't mind. I'm not fussy. You can call it soccer if you want.
So what does it mean to a lot of British people? I mean, they're so mad about it. I mean, they're so crazy about it. So
my team is Bristol City. I'm a Bristol boy,
okay.
And that's the team that I have supported for 57 years.
And how much are you heartbroken?
Very, very. It is almost every year as a year of great disappointment. They raise the hopes and then they lower them again. I always keep hoping.
Okay. So it's more like a psychological attachment.
Indeed.
Your hometown.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, you have a very long list of very significant posts that you have taken as a career diplomat. Just to name a few, like including but not limited to Tokyo, Moscow, and Vienna, and of course Korea. And I also heard that you visited North Korea as well. I'd like to hear the experience. How was that?
It was, I feel really lucky to have had the opportunity to visit North Korea. Mm-hmm. And I went there in 2003. It was an exciting visit because it was at a time when we felt that both sides had decided it was time to start talking to each other. And my biggest memory of my own visit to North Korea was the number of conversations that I had with people. I realized that until then, I had just thought of North Korea as this weird country that we kind of read about and that we didn't really know very much
Army
about.
Kingdom.
Absolutely, just a kind of mysterious place full of strange people who we didn't understand. And then this gave me the opportunity to say, they're people. They're people who talk and who communicate and who live their lives. It is perfectly possible for us to find things to talk about, for us to find things to agree about. Mm-hmm. I think we found, as our diplomatic relationship went on with North Korea, we found it very frustrating that we did not quickly add to the things on which we agreed, and that as time goes on, you realize more and more that there are certain inflexibilities, probably on both sides. Yeah. We are pretty inflexible about the North Korean nuclear weapons program. But the whole point, as you know, of diplomacy is communication. It's the attempt to influence. It's the attempt to identify things that we can cooperate on. It was, as I say, it was just a chance to talk to people and actually to find things that we could agree on, to find things that we could laugh about, and just to feel, in the end, we're all normal people. And that tells us that if we keep trying, we might at some point find a way of actually identifying some really substantial cooperation and put our relationships with them on a much more productive and constructive path.
So knowing is the beginning.
I think so. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that not talking is a dead end.
You are also the UK governor on the board of IAEA.
That's right. Yes.
So you probably have some expertise to assess the North Korea's nuclear capability. So can you share the thought?
Well, I mean, I think that these things are difficult to pin down with any degree of accuracy. So there was no sense in which, certainly at my time in the IAEA, that anyone had a sort of piece of paper on which they were sort of totting up and saying, okay, that's now 10 warheads or 20 warheads or 50 missiles or whatever it is. But I think it's pretty clear to us that North Korea has a nuclear capability of some sort. I think that's clear. How much of it works, how much of it doesn't work is perhaps less clear, but that doesn't really matter in the sense that the country clearly has an intention to build up a nuclear deterrent capacity. That's clearly what has happened.
So they have clear intention to build up. But what about the denuclearization willingness? Because there were some couple of summits between North Korea and the United States. Some people say, well, they're ready to change, but others say, no, they are not. They're never going to give up on the nuclear weapons.
Well, I think that it's very clear that that's a question that the North Koreans are reluctant to enter into. That I think the conclusion that we've drawn from the sort of conversations that we saw when the Trump administration was engaging with North Korea. What we saw was repeatedly a reluctance by the North Koreans once they were asked to start talking about concrete steps. They were always talking very partially. They would say, okay, we'll kind of destroy a facility somewhere. We will put our testing range out of action. But they were always talking about small parts of the picture. And the message was that once people started talking about a sort of comprehensive picture, they were unwilling to commit even to talking about what the end point of the process might be. Right. And so what we're not seeing, I think, from North Korea at the moment is this willingness to commit to a vision out there ultimately that says, yep, we are prepared to embark upon a path of complete denuclearization. And I think from that, we get another signal, a signal from North Korea, which says we are not ready and not willing to engage fully with the international community. It's their choice. We think it's the wrong choice, but that seems to be the choice that they've made for now.
And also, Prime Minister Boris Johnson, he mentioned that he is willing to join CPTPP, which is Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership.
Indeed. Yep.
UK is not particularly in the Pacific region. So why is it saying that he would like to join that club?
The CPTPP is it's a community of nations with very significant size of economy. I mean, I think together they will shortly or already do make up about 16% of global GDP. So this is a really substantial gathering of countries, and it's one which actually, when you look at the spread of the countries concerned, you know, a lot of those countries are not terribly close to each other. I haven't actually yet got up my map and said, actually, is Britain closer to some of these countries? Let's say, is Britain closer to Canada than Canada is to Chile? Maybe. I don't know. I'll measure it one of these days. But you know, it is a huge area that it covers. And one of the other real points of interest to us in the UK is that it is quite progressive in the way it actually frames its trading agreements. So the CPTPP has got quite quickly into looking at areas of trade which the classic free trade agreements don't actually cover. So, you know, they look at how to define relationships in e-commerce and digital trading. Right. They're more progressive in things like telecom sector.
And environment, labor and everything.
Well, I think some of those things, you could argue that depending on which relationship you look at, some of the bilateral FTAs will go into that in a big way. As you'll probably know, the European Union, they are they're very hot on labour standards, environmental standards, and so on. So on that, you see a slightly sort of differentiated picture. As I say, I think when people ask me, they say, wait a minute, you guys have just left the European Union, but you want to join this Pacific area. Why? I think those are some of the reasons. As I say, the CPTPP is an exciting organisation. It gets into areas that some of the classic FTAs haven't got into. The other thing to remember is that our membership of the single market in the European Union meant that there was a European judicial institution. There was a European court that basically had the last word on what happened in the UK. And again, the majority, as you know, voted for Brexit in the UK. Some people, it was a serious issue for them. They said, you know, we're an independent country. We want to be told that it's our court system that has the last word. Again, one of the answers to the question as to why leave the EU and join CPTPP. Of course, CPTPP has its rules. It has a rule book, it has guidelines, it has standards, it has procedures, but it doesn't have a sort of almighty court system which sits on top of the legislative systems of each of the member countries. So again, when people say, you know, you've left one organisation and you want to join another, those organisations are not the same.
No, I was just thinking that because maybe the Britain was thinking that the powerhouse or epicenter of all the international community and everything is going actually moving from Atlantic to Pacific.
Well, of course, you've just shown that you are much more skilled at doing my job than I am, because of course that is the big factor, obviously. While I was waffling on about the European Union, of course, I forgot to mention, obviously, because seriously, that is it very much is a reflection of the fact that Britain recognises the acceleration in the importance and the substance of the broad Asian region. It recognises that we have to take advantage of the fact. People will argue, people will keep arguing in the UK forever about whether it was a good idea to leave the European Union or not. But now we have left it, it makes sense that we use our freedom of decision making to say, actually, now do we put more resource into our investment, into our relationships in other regions? And if so, which are the regions where we need to be more active and more visible and making more effort? So that absolutely is one of the factors behind this. What we are calling in our, we did a review of our international engagement, a big comprehensive review published a couple of months ago, and it's called a tilt towards the Indo-Pacific region. So we are always now talking about the Indo-Pacific tilt.
Right.
And this, as I say, this means to just sort of veering over to put more of the emphasis in our relationships on the Indo-Pacific region.
Well, UK is having a very busy year this year. So in June, I remember you are hosting G7 summit.
Indeed.
And you invited us. I mean, UK invited India, Australia, EU, and Korea.
Yes.
So why?
We, again, to some extent, it goes back to what we were saying about our interest in deeper engagement with countries in the very broad kind of Indo-Pacific region.
Yeah.
Again,
definitely.
I'm conscious that when you look on the map and you look India, South Korea, Australia, that is a very large area of the world. But, I think, again, it reflects how much our vision is sort of shifting from and looking beyond Europe and looking over across to the Indo-Pacific region. So I think that we recognise that given, as I was saying, that the original concept of the G7 was that countries with the capacity for solving big global problems could come together, and we recognised, and we very much have high expectations of India, Australia and South Korea as countries who can bring that capacity as well. But I think the crucial thing that will determine this is to say, have we been successful in bringing our economic resources, in bringing them together and saying, what can we do? What impact can we make on the really big ticket global challenges like health and, even more important, the global climate change. So if we end up and thinking that was a successful recipe for addressing those global challenges, then, as I say, I think the concept will develop and it will continue.
Right. Well, you mentioned the global climate change, and UK is also hosting, I think it's in November, the UN Climate Change Conference.
That's right.
The 26th
Yep.
in Glasgow. Well, how serious the UK is on the climate change issue? I know EU is very serious about the climate change issues.
Well,
you have left to EU.
Let me tell you. I mean, I speak from experience of sort of representing Britain in the EU for many years, and like many British diplomats, I have years of experience in working inside EU institutions, and I think actually that on the climate agenda, I think Britain has brought quite a lot to the sort of progressive nature of EU policies, and I think we have been serious about climate change for a long time. My memory tells me that as far back as when Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister, so we're going back to the 1980s basically, she was very personally committed to tackling the problem of climate change.
Was she?
And it is really quite interesting because waking up to climate change to some people sounds a little bit like the sort of thing that a progressive politician would do. Margaret Thatcher was obviously labelled a conservative politician.
Right.
And in some respects she was. In some respects you could categorise her as a sort of ultra neoliberal politician or whatever. But on climate change she was a progressive. Mm-hmm. And I think that was quite important for sort of setting a trend that we've seen ever since then, which is every time the government changes in the UK, the policies on climate remain progressive and they remain active, and no government has come to power in the UK since the 1980s saying, wait a minute, all this climate change stuff, we don't need to be doing this. Every government has actually wanted to go faster on climate change. And what we've done in the UK is we have progressively increased our emissions reduction targets. Mm-hmm. Of course, we've set ourselves also a 2050 net zero target.
Right.
But before that, we're aiming for, we take 1990 as our baseline, we aim for 68% reductions in emissions, which is probably one of the highest figures in the world, and we've also made this the law. Mm-hmm. So when we set our 2050 target, we don't just say, that's what we'd like to get to. That's what we hope to get to. Mm-hmm. We say we have to do it because we make it a matter of law. So we have a climate change act, a climate change law, which says it's obligatory, you have to meet this target. And so what that means is it generates lots of other processes where it's, corporations, institutions, they can be asked and to say, okay, why is your activity not consistent with this 2050 target? And because the 2050 target is the law, mm-hmm. we can require you to accelerate your processes and do more efficient things and do more effective things in order to achieve the targets.
Well, that's impressive because I know a lot of countries have a tax, carbon tax, or what is that, the limit, carbon limit.
Yeah.
But I think it's my first time to hear that have a law to keep the net zero by 2050.
Yep.
EU has the same goal.
The
US has the same. We have the same goal.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, the EU has the same goal, and there are some countries within the EU mm-hmm. who have done similar to us, who have put climate change legislation. It may well be that there'll be more and more countries mm-hmm. who will do something similar.
Right in the law.
Yep.
I know you have been asked this question repeatedly, maybe 1,000 times. So what is your favorite place and food in Korea? You've been here like 3 years,
yes, right? I know. And do you know my favorite place in Korea? But when I first came to live in Korea in 2017, mm-hmm. I had the chance of going to stay in the Haeunsa temple.
Haeunsa.
And Haeunsa, I still haven't really been anywhere that is quite so wonderful as Haeunsa.
What was so wonderful about Haeunsa?
Just the history and just the amazing, the Palman Daejangyeong. And I'm a bit of a sort of history freak, and I just these sort of things very much kind of excite me when I see them.
What about the food? Favorite food? Don't tell me kimchi.
Okay, I will not say kimchi. I really like a lot of things which seem to end with the words gui. And so I like, in terms of vegetable dishes, dodok gui.
Dodok gui, yes.
And galchi gui.
Yeah, galchi gui is really famous, and my sons really loved it too. I heard you have some scrapbook.
Yes, I have.
Yeah.
Do you want to see it?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
I'd love to.
All right. I wondered about this. I'll have to go and get it.
Okay.
So these are all sort of leaflets or things from things from restaurants or whatever.
Really? Wow.
Or occasionally I will do my own sketches.
That's basically the memoir of your 3 years old.
This is mainly my first 6 months actually. So I did most of this before I started working. Okay. So this is when I was just doing my language study period. And I had more time to get out and get around, basically.
So before you actually start your work as an ambassador, you have a language studying period.
Yes. Yeah.
How long is that?
6 months.
6 months.
Yeah.
I know you're very fluent in Korea.
Not as fluent as I should be.
Well, this is a time that you can brag about your Korean skill. So I'd like to ask you the last word to the Korean people in Korean.
Oh no, that's so challenging for me. 마지막으로 그 대한민국의 국민에 대해서 특별한 메시지 있습니다. 왜냐하면 올해 영국은 아주 중요한 기후 변화에 대한 회의를 개최하고 있습니다. COP26이라는 회의입니다. 그래서 그 COP26에서 가능하면 기후 변화에 대해서 효과적인 그런 적분법에 대해서 합의하길 바랍니다. Will that do?
That's just wonderful. That was just wonderful. Well, thank you very much for sharing your time.
Not at all.
Yeah, and I really truly enjoyed the conversation with you.
I enjoyed it too.
And it was really lovely.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. That's very kind of you. And once again, I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Well, thank you so much.
Not at all.
감사합니다.